Hey everybody, thank you for tuning back into the Automation Podcast. Sean Tierney here with Insights. And in today's episode, I'm going to recap my trip to Schneider Electric's Innovation Summit in Las Vegas, and it was November 18th and 19th. So I am recording this during the week of Thanksgiving, and it will come out the following week. And so you guys are seeing this early December, late November. And I wanted to film this, though, this week of Thanksgiving because I wanted to kind of share all my thoughts and what I've seen and everything while it was still fresh on my mind. And if you're watching this, you can see that I'm in my office this time, recording here. And I got a little presentation I'm going to walk through that's going to help me as I discuss this. You're not going to miss anything if you're listening, but it'll help me kind of with different topics I want to talk about and cover. So in any case, before we get to any of that, as you probably know, we've covered Schneider Electric quite a bit since 2022 when Louis Arone came on to talk about Automation Expert and Universal I/O. And I thought that was interesting, but that wasn't really, I think, a good introduction to the whole of Schneider Electric, and it wasn't meant to be. Then later we had Jay Cortell had arranged several interviews. I think the first was with Joel and Mahua on their machine-level PLCs. That's the Modicon PLCs and the Machine Expert development software. Of course, everything's named EcoStruxure from Schneider Electric. And then, we had drives on. We had, we talked about drives a couple different times. We talked about HMIs. We talked about IPCs. We talked about all kinds of stuff. We even had the TSYS Island folks on. So all of those episodes, I'll put something up on the screen and I'll put links in the description. So if you want to go check the previous episodes out, you can. And just a lot of great information that I've learned since 2022 about Schneider, because previous to then, I really only had spent a lot of time with Rockwell and Siemens. So just very interesting stuff. I know there's a lot of Schneider users out there too. So in any case, then of course this year we got our first Modicon PLC. So we did a first time programming that, and we also was sponsored to take a look at their new Edge IO NTS platform, which I thought was really cool. And I did like almost an hour episode on that. You guys saw that a week or two ago. And it was just a blast unboxing a box of IO and using it for the first time. And so Schneider had approached me earlier in the year about actually two different sponsorships. They wanted me to come out to their show. And I had talked to other people about their shows, and I was getting crickets. So when Schneider said, hey, do you want to come out and do like 6 interviews at the show? I said yes. And then they later contacted me and said, hey, can we get you to do 3 sponsored videos as well? I'm like, yes, this is great, right? So these type of sponsorships make it affordable to go to these shows, because if the show's not local, I mean, there's a couple $1,000s with just in expenses alone. I know I just did my expenses. And so they help cover that, and then we get content out of it, right? Because just walking around a show, that doesn't provide any content, really. I mean, you can generate content out of it, but if it's not sponsored, it's not like we're in the health or, beauty or fitness segments where we're going to get millions of views and actually make a decent money on ads. This is a small, tight-knit group of engineers, electricians, and technicians who use PLCs, HMIs, SCADA, VFDs, sensors, and, there's only about 80,000 of us, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, so there's not enough ad revenue out there to kind of random episodes. So in any case, that said, I did want to take this opportunity to go to this summit. First time I've been to a Schneider event, and let me go ahead and pull up the screen here. And this event really had 3 different audiences it was targeting. And the first audience was the industry people like me, people who are interested in PLCs, HMI, that kind of stuff, right? VFDs, soft starters, the whole ball of wax. And then the second group they were targeting was power, people who have to do things with power generation or power utilization, right? And that's really not my ball of wax. And then the third group was data center people, right? And the power and the data center are really kind of coming together because of all the data centers being built in America, right? And so it was really these 3 tiers they were focused on. I think they were aiming for around 2,000 customers to show up, or maybe that's 2,000 total, I don't know. But it's not in line with the biggest events you would have anywhere. And I also think because they had 3 different segments, which makes sense because their company does it all, I don't know that they targeted a lot of, the industry people, especially when energy is so hot, right? And data centers are so hot. But there were some there, and there were a lot of industry products there. I would say they probably had a third of the floor. I didn't measure, but that's just my opinion. And in any case, so I went out there, and I kind of learned a lot of this while I was there. But in any case, if you look at, if you're watching the screen, you can see the website, and I'll try to include links to anything I talk about in the description. But on both audio and video. But if you want to go and check out what was there. But here the subtitle is Energy Tech, Automation, AI, and Grid. So AI was kind of woven between everything. As you'd imagine, it's a hot topic these days, right? So let me get my mouse onto the right screen here. And let's go to the next slide. So we stayed at the Fontainebleau hotel. And this hotel was a fairly new hotel. I think it was built in 2023 or opened in 2023. And I really liked the conference section, although it was quite a walk from the hotel. And they obviously make you walk through their casino to do that, or the edge of their casino. And which, it's Las Vegas, so that's expected. Even the airport made you walk through the airport casino. It's like they're just trying to get you to gamble, I guess. I don't know. I always lose, so I don't gamble, because every time I've gambled, I've lost. I don't think I've ever won much at all. So it's really just throwing money away from me. But in any case, so this facility was really cool. It was good for conventions and whatnot. I think if I did this again, I'd probably just stay at a Holiday Inn Express and rent a car. And I'm going to tell you why. It's so nice to be at the hotel, but being an East Coaster, right? So I'm usually drinking coffee probably before 5 o'clock every morning. Well, 5 o'clock Eastern time, there was nothing open. There was nothing open until like 8 or 9 Eastern in Las Vegas. So how do you get coffee? Well, you think you're gonna get it in your room. No, that's one of the things that this hotel did not do. They did not have coffee in the room. So, I thought, should I travel with a coffee pot or just stay somewhere else next time? But if you don't drink coffee, probably not a big deal for you. Although I will say, being used to getting up and eating breakfast at 5 a.m., the room service is, like all these hotels that run $300-400 a night, extremely expensive. So just give me a Dunkin' Donuts coffee and a sandwich, and I'm going to be happy every morning. Not that's what I eat every morning, but when I'm traveling, that'll put a smile on my face every morning. So in any case, that was tough, not having the coffee in the morning, and I ended up paying for some of that very expensive coffee at some point because I just needed my coffee. But once you get out of your hotel in the morning and you went over to actually where the show was in the, down that long corridor and then up the other flight of elevators to get to the convention area, they had this beautiful registration booth. You walk up to a tablet, you put your name in, hit print badge. Somebody behind the counter gives you your badge. It was very nicely done. And the other thing I liked was that they had these huge displays. I wouldn't call them TVs. They just huge displays behind them that had the whole agenda for the day. So I thought that was great because if you didn't have to pull out, if you're talking to somebody, hey, you want to go see this, you want to go see that, you didn't have to pull out your phone. But I will say their app was excellent. And I've used a lot of these apps. They're usually excellent. Their app was excellent. I give their app 5 out of 5 stars because it was just really easy to use. And my emailed agenda that was through the marketing firm didn't have all the correct room numbers, but the app had everything correct. So in any case, great app, great registration desk, very friendly Schneider people. And so the first thing I did was, beginning of the show, a lot of times you'll have this media breakfast you go to, right? And so a media breakfast is where you hear what the company wants the media to publish, okay? And so you can go to a standard breakfast and just chat with other attendees, but, I'm there as media, right? I'm here to do interviews. I'm here to create videos, sponsored videos. So I'm like, I'm going to go to the media breakfast. And I was a little disappointed because usually when I hear media breakfast, I'm thinking breakfast. This was like a light continental, right? And again, as somebody who eats at 5 o'clock in the morning, when your media breakfast at 7:30 and there's really no edible food unless you like continental kind of stuff. And it wasn't like the bagels and donuts either. So, but in any case, that's on the hotel. That's what they do. And, no ding against Schneider. But in any case, I thought this was very interesting. Not having known much about what they do with the energy companies, they were sharing a whole portfolio of grid management software. So they got a bunch of 5 different packages of EcoStruxure just for grid, like managing assets and transmission operation. They call it their digital grid platform, and just very interesting stuff. I actually took some pictures of the slides because I was like, this is really cool. They say they can boost up to 60% reduction in deployment time and all these other things. So very interesting. Lots of details in this presentation, and I thought it was very good, even though it's not my ball of wax. And they were talking about this thing called the EcoStruxure Foresight, which is a new product that has AI built in, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment here. So then we had the keynote. So this was actually quite a bit of ways from where we were. It's in the theater, so it was a good, 5-minute walk to get from the, I think we were on floor 4 or floor 6, down the elevator and then across to the theater. And still in the same building, but in a different part of the complex. And the theater, though, was really nice. I took a lot of pictures of it. And, I had 2 options for let me just go ahead to the theater. I had 2 options where to sit. So one media group hired me to do the videos. They had front row seats. The other group that hired me to do podcasts or sponsored podcasts, they had a back row. And I decided to do the back row just because the people sitting in the front, they looked like they were shoulder to shoulder, like they were in those regular just folding chairs. And they were packed pretty tight, I thought. And then in the back, I just had this beautiful view because I sat right along the aisle. And it was a comfy chair, not a dining chair. And I just got this beautiful view of everything, right? And I was just using my phone. I didn't bring any fancy camera equipment with me. I was actually told that it would be better to get for the videos to do it on my phone because it's more authentic. But in any case, that's what they said. And but it was a beautiful theater. Now they say online it holds up to 3,800 people. I don't think if you look at that seating area in the front before you get to these rows. I think I counted the chairs, tried to count the chairs. There's about 1,000 people down there. So I would say they probably had between their 1,400 and 2,000 people they were expecting come to the show. And but the way they integrated these screens, 1 big screen, 2 vertical screens, and then outside of the stage area, 2 more vertical screens, really for the sights and sounds did great. And here's another picture of it with everybody sitting down. We're getting ready to start here. And I did put up a video with some of this footage. So if you guys want to check that out, that'll be in the description as well. And actually, I'll link to the article at the blog because I have all the videos in one post. In any case, this started out with a drum, like kind of a dramatic drum, almost like a Blue Man Group type of, without all the messy stuff. But so there's 3 drummers, and they did this 2.5-minute drumming. I don't know what you call it. They played this song. And the graphics behind them were just going great. I mean, it was just amazing. It was going through all the high points for Schneider as they were doing this really awesome drumming solo. And I actually put a copy of this. Right now, it's for members only on YouTube. I don't know if I can switch it to everybody because I think it's copyrighted. But maybe I'll do that and just see. I'm not monetizing it. It's their song, not mine. But it was just so impressive. What a great opening act. Only 2.5 minutes, but the drums and the beats. Yeah, really good. And the choreographed video that was playing behind them was just awesome. Just really awesome. I mean, these drummers made sure they hit the right high points when the screen changed, and I just thought they did a great job with that. And then from there, we had just a lot of data. So I'll just go over this one slide. They say by 2026, they expect industrial electrical demand to surge by 15% in the USA. And then by 2028, peak demand will be greater than peak supply. That's what they're saying. These are estimates. And then by 2050, the electricity demand to be more than double what it is today. Now, I don't think this trend will go exactly like that, right? I mean, necessity is the mother of invention, right? So if we're running out of electricity production, people will make more power plants, or people will become more efficient, or there'll be new sources of energy or new ways to store energy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But this is the trend they're seeing today, right? And so they had just a ton of slides like this full of this information. They had so many that I actually released a video which I put some music to it, bought a little music track to put with it, and I released it on all the platforms. So you could just see all the slides I took pictures of. I think there's like 20 or so slides, and just a lot of information. And even though I'm not in the power industry, I found that so interesting. Then they had this video, which is in the LinkedIn video that they live streamed this keynote. So I'll link to the live stream in the description. Also, this video I'm going to talk about right now is at about 28 minutes and 30 seconds. They had this history of Schneider Electric. You know, Schneider's bought so many companies. But this was, as somebody who hosts the History of Automation podcast, I was like, this is so cool. So in any case, they started out with like Square D, right? The first arcless enclosed fuse back in 1905. And then they had some other favorites. They had, I just interviewed the engineer who did the firmware for the Modicon 084. So they had the first PLC. Now they said 1968. I would probably say more 1969 because, you know, inception and deployment, you know, there's a difference there. Yes, Morley came up with the idea in 68, but they didn't install it into GM until 69. So, what are you going to say? Then they had Wonderware, and I was wondering why they had Wonderware listed as 2003. Because as we've seen on the History Automation podcast, Gary wrote a book about the history of Wonderware, and my co-host. And that was like mid or early 90s, late 80s. So I don't know what that date is signifying, but it's probably a Wonderware product they released. Maybe it's a driver suite or something. And then OSI Pi. So from my understanding and talking to them, Schneider now fully owns Aviva. So originally they couldn't buy the thing 100% because FTC was like, you're monopolizing, but eventually I guess they own it completely. That's what somebody told me on the show floor, a Schneider person. So anyways, having used OSI Pi a lot as historian, Factory Talk historian with Rockwell, I really came to like it a lot and understand it a lot. And so I have a soft spot, and they're showing a big 3.5-inch floppy disk, and they're showing the date as 1980, I believe. So that video is well worth watching. If you don't want to watch the whole, I think it's 2 hours, the whole keynote, which I enjoyed. But again, I was a captive audience. I would definitely recommend, I think it's 28 minutes and 30 seconds. Again, I'll put that in the description. Definitely want to check out that video. You know, a lot of these companies are American companies we're talking about, even though Schneider's a global company. And Schneider still makes thousands and thousands of products in America, too. So, so even though they're a global company, it's still nice to see that there. And they even had stuff in there about Telemechanique and other companies that weren't American. But it was just very interesting stuff. And then they had the big Foresight. And the thing that I remember about Foresight is, they had some slides and everything. But they did this AI demo. And it looked like it was actually running live because it had that delay you would expect from an AI, like a ChatGPT or a Grok or one of those. And but he was talking with an Alexa-like voice. I almost wonder if they hired the same actress who did Alexa because it sounded very similar. Well, to me, it sounded the same. But in any case, it was pretty cool. I don't think we'll be using that feature in the near future, but I'm sure it's coming, right? And then they talked about all the products they made in the USA because it costs US audience, and they talked about the Altivar 630 drive. I thought that was interesting. I didn't know anything about that drive prior. And then from there, after the keynote was done, we were scheduled to do a show floor tour. They called it the Innovation Park. And this was for media. And let's see here. Let me just go one more. And so before we took that tour, I tried to get a pan, because you're only seeing a very short piece if you're watching of this pan. So you can tell just by looking at it, the floor's pretty empty because the door is just open. And people are just coming in, and you can see the size of it. It's not the size of an Automate, okay, or other big shows like that, but it still was big. There was lots of stuff there. I would say if you've been to an RAOTM, bigger than that. But in any case, it was good size. But again, it's not the size of an Automate show or a massive show like that. You know, again, target audience 2,000 people, right? So in any case, I was waiting there for the media tour. They gave me a pair of earbuds and a little receiver, and the guy giving the tour had a microphone, which worked really well because as the show floor filled up, it could be hard to hear people. So in any case, here is our tour guide. This is Jesse, who's a super nice guy, super great guy, and he's holding. I asked him if he'd hold up the picture because at one point he was talking about the history of their industrial products, and he had a picture of the Monicon 084. And so I asked if he could hold it up so I could take a picture because I wanted to send it to Chuck, who was on that team who developed that product because we just interviewed him. So just kind of say, hey, they're still talking about you guys. But in any case, Jesse was pretty awesome to work with and a good spot for holding up that picture. And then, of course, as they're going through the energy side, after a while, I'm like, okay, I need to go see some industry stuff. So I went over and I saw the Edge IO, which you guys all know, and I should say Edge IO NTS because they have other Edge IO products, like well, we'll see in a minute. But in any case, they had all of the Edge IO products out. And they had a nice display for the Monicon M580. I think it's an E-Pack. I'll have to put my glasses on for this one. And it was interesting because they had redundant power supplies, redundant controllers. They had some Hirschman redundant switches. It was just a very interesting layout and just showing off this line. I haven't had anybody come on to talk about this in depth, so I don't know much about it, but it looked impressive. And then they also had, they own Foxborough, the Foxborough DCS system, so you could see some Foxborough there. They had Tricon. I believe that's part of Triconics. So they had some Triconics stuff there. I wanted to say hi to the Triconics guys for Gary, but I got distracted. I had so much going on. And then they, of course, had the Monicon X80 IO, which is what we saw on the 580, and then the Edge IO. So as I'm walking around here, I'm seeing a lot of stuff I've never seen before, especially when it comes to the Foxborough DCS system or Triconics. But and there's your Foxborough Edge IO. So that's a different type of Edge IO, NTH instead of NTS. So in any case. And then this guy, the Monicon M660. So I was talking to Kareem, who I interviewed, and some other folks there, and they were like really hyped about this. So it looks like an IPC, okay? So think of an IPC, I don't know, 8 inches by 3 inches by 6 inches, kind of like, a box, right? It's a box, a shoebox. In any case, they were hyped about this because this unit comes with Linux and comes with Machine Expert Runtime, a CodeSys runtime on it. And they said it can do up to 300 axis of motion. It has Intel chips in it, so it's very fast. But it also can also run simultaneously Windows. So you could run your SCADA or HMI on there as well. And they tell me that you could also put in Automation Expert Runtime. So you can make it a DPAC or or just a regular Machine Expert PLC. All simultaneously. And so they're very excited about that, especially they kept saying 300 axes of motion. I'm like, wow, that's a lot of axes. So that's the Monicon M660. And then, of course, I was interviewing different people, and when we were talking about drives, we started talking about soft starters. So I went over to see a look at their current gen soft starter, which has too many features for me to even mention, but it has a lot of features you would think of in a drive and not in a soft starter. So very interesting there. And then, of course, we took the look at the brand new HVAC drive from Schneider. Now, they have an existing one. This is the one that's in beta right now. So coming out in 2025. So they have this brand new HVAC drive. They're going to have multiple versions. This is just one of the different versions. But the stuff it does, and it's designed for the HVAC industry. So it has all those protocols, right? And then they had this simple on-machine drive, or machine mount drive, which had IO Link in it. So I grabbed a picture of that. And then, of course, their process VFDs as well, or VSDs. Okay. And then this one, and that's Kareem in the picture. I did get a chance to interview him. He was great. We talked so much. Mahua came over. We talked to her. And I hope to do an interview. I actually owe her an email. Hope to get her on the podcast to talk all about this assistant AI. So, we see all the big companies working with Microsoft, working with Copilot to produce products. And one of the things I thought was interesting about this, and now this comes with Automation Expert Platform, And I believe you actually can license this, like it's a subscription, for an on-premise solution, but that's not out today. But in any case, they're training it on what they have. So it'll actually bring up samples out of their own sample code libraries. But when it's released, you will be able to train it on your processes. It'll be your own on-premise AI that you can train, that the information will never be sent to Schneider or anybody else. And I think that's cool because a lot of companies have, you have people getting ready to retire and they want to start training the AI with, here's the questions and here's the answers. And, so the next generation will be able to come in and say, hey, what did Joe used to do when this happened, right? So I thought that was very cool. And I like the way people are deploying these. When I'm finding myself more and more going to a Grok or a ChatGPT when internet searches fail me, because internet searches, they seem to have gotten dumber over the years. And the AI, though, is trying to put it into context, put the information into context. So it's just a much better way to search, right? So in any case, and of course, they always had the machines in motion, just like every show. They had, robots, and they had the track systems and whatnot. So that's kind of a view of the industry side. I did want to show off this. This was a full size, I don't know how many inches, over 100 inches, probably, I don't want to guess. But this is a curved screen that was running a video talking about liquid cooling data centers, which I thought was so interesting. But just this beautiful, gorgeous, large screen. And I got to meet the guy who did all the 3D work for it. Very cool company and very cool job they did on that 3D. All right. So that was a lot of the day. And then I had a session to go to. It's how real companies are using today's technology to scale innovation and set records doing that. And I was supposed to do a sponsored video on this, except when we got in there, these four very nice, very smart, what's the word I'm looking for? Earnest people. We're not talking about how real companies are using today's technology to scale innovation and set records doing it. They were talking about, I would have called this 4 different companies' journey through 4 different companies take a journey into carbon sequestration, or carbon neutral power, because that's what they all did. They were all about taking carbon out of the atmosphere. That's what I got out of it. At some point, I kind of even threw my hands up. I'm like, are we going to talk about using today's technology to scale innovation and set records? Or are we going to talk about how can we take carbon out of the atmosphere? And I get it. One guy's like, we have the biggest carbon with, open air carbon withdrawal system, CO2 sucker out of the air system in the world. They were doing it because they wanted to sell the CO2. And they were doing it. They were owned by like a oil company or petrochemical company. So I'm like, all right, whatever. In any case, they were all very earnest. They all had their heart in their missions that this was what they wanted to do with their lives. But I was waiting for how they were using Schneider technology to scale innovation and set records doing it. And that title was probably some marketing person. And that happens at every show. Every show I've been to, there's been one like this where the title doesn't really meet my expectations anyways. But then we had a session, how connected networks are fueling industrial growth. And so this was really how connected networks in our systems, whether they be automation, industrial automation, power, energy, buildings, are fueling, I would say, how AI is using that information to help people be more effective and more efficient. And so they had ServiceNow in there, and they were really talking a lot about AI and how you can now use that data you have on the plant floor to help you either prompt you that something's wrong or help you walk through a scenario, through using an automated, instead of using a standard operating procedure, use something that's a little bit more automated and a little bit more intelligent. So it was an interesting session as well. And they're really talking about the collaboration of Viva and ServiceNow. They're going at it different ways. ServiceNow is more about the standard operating procedures, automating that, where Aviva is more about automating alarms and events and data collection and, analytics and all that. But I thought it was a very interesting session as well, and really didn't come away with anything I could actually use, but still was interesting to talk about and think about. And then after that, I had to do an interview, and then I had to sit down. I should say have to. I had the pleasure of doing an interview in that Schneider product manager, and then I sat down with a product team from France. So 3 different people, and Bobby, Robin, and Olivier. And it was just such a great conversation. I learned so much. I didn't even know what Control Expert was. They explained it to me. And it was I wanted to do an interview. That didn't work out. So I actually saw Louis Aron there too for a moment when I went to sit down with these folks and got to say hi to him. And we're going to try to get together up in Andover someday. I'd like to see the Modicon 084 they have up there. But in any case, that was a great sit down. I really appreciate them taking time out of their afternoon. And then there was this fireside chat with NVIDIA's Rev, and I'm Liberian? Probably didn't pronounce that right. But in any case, I thought this was very interesting. And, NVIDIA was talking about, so this is a VP who handles Omniverse, and you think digital twin. And he went through the conversation of, number one, I never thought of this, but NVIDIA has always kind of done digital twins because they had to simulate how the chips they design worked because they're very expensive to make. So you don't want to make a whole bunch of platters of chips that don't work, right? And so early on, they learned to create simulations or digital twins of their microprocessors, their GPUs, and other chips so that they could ensure that they worked as desired, as designed, as they wanted them to work. And it was really awesome to hear that kind of part of the conversation. I mean, he went as far as saying, if an engineer tried to sabotage us to make the chip not work, we would never produce it because we would find that in the simulation. I wouldn't have thrown the gauntlet down to that one, but in any case, he made a good point about that. And so it was a very interesting conversation. Then he had a conversation here about how they were looking to model the real world. They wanted to make their digital twins better, and how they were looking, couldn't find a system. They stumbled upon what the folks, Pixar, who makes Toy Story, they stumbled upon what they used, right? And they built on it over time, and they ended up, it's this virtual scene descriptor language or something. Anyways, long story short, they ended up developing that more, and they have other partners on it, including Pixar, but other people from industry as part of this group that's managing this new spec, so that when you have a digital twin, you have descriptions for everything that's part of that digital twin, including, size, dimension, color, texture, all that good stuff. And Schneider announced at the event in this session that they had joined that consortium around that standard. And I cannot remember right now, but I just thought that was very interesting as well. And so that was it for day one. Day two, so I was beat because, as a matter of fact, I was supposed to go to dinner with them at 6:30 to a very fancy restaurant, but that was 7, 8, 9:30 my time. I'm usually in bed by that time, and I was just wiped out because, having gotten up so early. So I spent day two, the morning, I got up at like 2:30 in the morning, and I worked for 8 hours on the first video I was sponsored to do. And then I did some sessions, hit the show floor, and then I had 4 more interviews to do, and then I had another video to do. So that was my day, the second day. And so spent that 8 hours in the morning creating that sponsored video because it was due that day. And then I jumped into a session called Igniting Industrial Competitiveness with Open Software-Defined Automation. I'm like, that is a mouthful, but I think this has more to do with Automation Expert. And what they talked about really was, again, very interesting. Why did Schneider Electric even move forward with Automation Expert, right? So they started just shortly before, if I understand the timeline, I sat down with Louis Aron in 2022. I think they probably started around 2020. And the whole idea was, and I even asked them at some point, and they didn't say anything, not in this session, but other people. It almost seems like they're competing with CodeSys a little bit. So their open software-defined platform or automation platform, basically you program it with Automation Expert, and you can download it to any device you want, and that supports Automation Expert. So it seems to me like they're almost taking the place in this area of CodeSys. But the reason for this is, and this gentleman, Whit from ExxonMobil, explained how expensive it is for them to upgrade from legacy systems to new systems, right? And so we don't see this a lot if your system's only 20 years old, because most of the 20-year-old systems can be easily migrated into today's system, right? But if you go farther back, right, if we go 30, 40 years ago, we all know, like on the Umbrella side, migrating a PLC5 to ControlLogix, there's some work there to do. The import utility will import a lot, but there's still a lot of work to do, a lot of engineering work. I mean, days, right? And so, for them, they don't have no downtime. So they have to do this like systems in parallel, and it's crazy. So it can cost them hundreds of millions of dollars to do these migrations, especially large DCS systems. And so they were really looking for, open software automation or, OPATH, or they were looking for something that would reduce this. They want a common software layer like C++, right? And not that they said that, but think about like every computer can run programs made with C++, right? So that's what they wanted. They wanted the hardware to be separate from the software. And so Schneider jumped in on this and, with Automation Expert. And to me, again, very similar to CodeSys from my viewpoint in many ways, because, if you have a CodeSys program, you should be able to use it in any CodeSys PLC, right? Especially if you make it into a library. I'm assuming that. I'm not a CodeSys expert. But in any case, that's what their thought was with open automation. But also, the thing here is that your programs can actually, when you have a program, it can actually be for multiple devices. So you may have one control scheme that actually downloads to a controller and to a VFD, right? And some of their VFDs do have DPACs on them, right? Or the capabilities to have DPACs. So very interesting. I don't think I did it justice. I did create a sponsored video on this, kind of going through what Witt said, because he went into detail about how, migrating is so expensive, and that's why they love having industrial hardware, but just like computers in their data center, they want to be able to upgrade them to the best in breed when they want and still take forward that software. So is this the future? I don't know. Apple is still doing great out there with its iPhone. It's not part of the Android ecosystem, right? So we see people trying to come in and challenge that. Windows Phone didn't challenge it well, but we're seeing people continue to try to challenge that too dominant, And I'm actually seeing more and more Linux on the personal PC side, because even in gaming, they're getting so good at taking Windows games and running them on Linux that, if that trend continues, that's going to put a hurt on Windows as the dominant platform in PCs, right? So interesting stuff. And with that was kind of it for the show. What do I have for content? So already I have the slideshow from the keynote. I have 2 sponsored videos that I've already done. I recorded 5 podcasts. There's another one I'm supposed to record at some point, but I've recorded 5 already. Mahua, I can't wait to get together with her and schedule a time to do an episode on the AI. And then we got this podcast. I did some other posting, but just a lot of content from this summit. It was very interesting. I'm glad I went. The flight out there and not having coffee, I'll tell you, I don't mean to be a crybaby, but give me my coffee. In any case, I did want to share that with you, just what I did. And look, I traveled most of the day Monday and all day Thursday, so it was 2 days of a show, but 4 days. So I thank Schneider through their different media partners for the sponsorship, because none of that would have been possible. It would just been just the travel expenses alone was $2,000. So when you're self-employed, you got to find a way to cover every expense. But I'm hoping you guys enjoyed that. Please check out the content. And again, in the links, I'm going to include links to the show, to the keynote, to go to the 2830 to see that awesome video on the history. I'll include links to the Automation blog where I have all the videos I've done. Some are members only, which depending if you're on YouTube, you'd go to YouTube to see the members only. And then really, I just hope you guys found this interesting. I did want to share my experience of being out at that show with you. And with that, I want to just wish you all good health and happiness. And until next time, my friends, peace.